Even though I am a tomboy, sometimes I let my girly side come out. No, I don't wear makeup or wear high heels, but occasionally things slip. When I was researching this week's video, I slipped up hard. My cuteness meter exploded and I squealed as loud as a 16-year-old girl offered 300 kittens at a One Direction concert. Yeah, I'm talking about the Flying Bufferbeam. The Peckett company was well renowned for making small industrial shunters. Started in 1864 as Fox Walker and Company, the company specialised in making 4- and 6-wheeled saddle tank engines. It was not that the company didn't make mainline engines, they did, but it was the smaller engines that they specialised. In 1880, the company received its namesake when Thomas Peckett and his 4 boys took over as chairman, and their work was focused around the Atlas Works in Bristol. By 1900, over 400 locomotives had been produced. The company was getting quite a reputation for themselves. Not only were they producing quality engines, but their repair works were second to none. Considering that the engines go through an incredible amount of work with little to no maintenance, to get them working like new was no mean feat. It led them to dominate the industrial market, and the name Peckett became synonymous with quality. During the First World War, Peckett became a limited company and focused on new orders and new repairs to its fleet in an aid to help the war effort. But after the war, there was a marked decline in new orders, with companies conserving what they had. They were still busy with repairs and continued to flourish. In 1923, the company was surviving mainly on the repair work that it was doing. The company was one of the few companies not only to survive but thrive in both the Great Depression and the Second World War. The war effort saw a massive surge with new builds and new engines, with new orders overtaking repairs works for the first time in decades. It was at the end of the war that the company began to flounder. While other companies opened for trade, Peckett saw a decline due to lack of raw materials and lack of innovation towards diesels. The Peckett company refused the advances of dieselization, but it had little choice in 1955 when the now British Rail Company announced plans for the end of steam-hauled locomotives across its network. The company dabbled in diesels, building 5 new diesel engines. The company, though, were ultimately too far behind to compete with other diesel works, and faced with their engines heading for the scrapyard rather than getting repaired, there simply wasn't enough work to keep the company going. Peckett was taken over by Reed Crane and Hoist Company in Yorkshire, where they supplied the spares and repairs to locomotives that were still running but privately owned by individuals or companies. But in 1982, there was barely anything at all that was recorded through the company's books, and both it and the Reed Company faded into obscurity. Peckett's number 1900 locomotive was built but during Peckett's golden years in 1936. Its design had to be specific due to the rails it would work on. Courtaulds was a huge textile and rayon manufacturer, concentrating on man-made fibres for a variety of uses. With the production of rayon is the production of waste. At its Holywell site, the site was cut in half by the Chester to Holyhead line, owned by the LMS. The two sites were only connected by a tunnel underneath the line. The tunnel was narrow, and the usual standard gauge shunters simply wouldn't fit. It seems a logical solution to put in a narrow gauge line. However, due to the location of the tunnel, there was a steep incline before and after the tunnel, and it was feared the narrow gauge engines simply wouldn't do. So in order to solve this peculiar problem, it needed a peculiar solution. The engine would have the power of a standard gauge engine, but the height of a narrow gauge engine. It sits only 5 foot 9 inches from rail to cab and weighs only 11 tonnes, and it was designed to push. To some, it looks like the boiler was squashed into the frames, giving the engine the nickname of the Flying Bufferbeam. The engine worked diligently, taking waste from the factory to the seawall until 1954, where it was considered too dangerous to allow the engine to continue. Its work was then overtaken by 2 diesels and a rope incline. The engine, now redundant from its primary work, returned to the Peckett works for a much needed overhaul. It wasn't there long, and with a new firebox, it was transferred to a new Courtaulds plant in Grimsby. Now, there was no need for a height restriction, so for the comfort of the crew, the cab's height was extended and the engine was set to work building the new factory. After the factory was finished, the engine was put in storage as a spare, while a new Sentinel engine took over its main duties. The little locomotive last saw steam in the early 1960s, where it was put in the back of the shed. It remained there for almost a decade until Courtaulds decided to sell the engine to a member of the Quainton Railway Society. The member brought the engine to the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre, and the restoration process to bring the engine back to life began. The little engine was given the name of Jill, and its original cab height was restored. It changed hands to another member before the completion of the overhaul, and modifications were made to bring the engine to competent standards, including the fitting of vacuum brakes, and it was set out to work on both light passenger trains and freight demonstrations. In the 1980s, the engine spent time on holiday at the Lakeside and Haverwaite Railway, during which the engine met many greats such as the Flying Scotsman. But it would be the Buckinghamshire Railway that the 1900 would call itself home. It worked for many years, however its boiler ticket would expire, and as of 2014 the engine went into the shed, where it's undergoing overhaul today. The Flying Bufferbeam is one of the most unusual engines I've ever covered. I've tried to find more information on the progress of 1900, however the last update was in 2020, and I suspect that COVID and other factors may have had a part in the lack of updates. It is promising though that this little powerhouse would hopefully graze the rails again, and hopefully soon. It's a weird little engine, and yeah, I'm going to admit it, it's so darn cute!